Hey, it's Alexis. Big topic, and this came up a couple times with clients last week, and I meant to make a video last week, but it was super busy. So I want to keep it short and get straight to the point, which is that the subconscious mind, which is the level at which we have things like intuition, we have things like our soul's purpose. They're talking at the level of the subconscious, which means it's not directly conscious. It's not the way that we think thoughts and have thoughts and we're like, oh yes, let me think from point A to point B and linearly all across the realm or all across the way. That's not how the subconscious mind, or that's not how the intuitive mind and the soul-based purpose mind work. They work on the level of the subconscious. And the subconscious, we'll use the word pre-verbal here, and I don't mean like, oh, before we learn how to speak. I mean before language existed in the sense that it exists now. So they're working on a much deeper level. And so we need to understand the language of the subconscious mind. Hey, Sham. We need to understand the language of the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind speaks in imagery. It speaks in metaphor. And those two things combined can be really confusing for us, right? So there's this really cool thing in improv where you think of something A, and your immediate thought is B, but actually you want to say C because the A to B is too obvious. So if somebody said ice cream cone in improv, you might start looking at ice cream cone and you're like, that's too obvious. A, ice cream cone. B makes me think of eating an ice cream cone. C makes me think to summers with my friends in Ohio. So I would start a scene about summers with my friends in Ohio. That's what your subconscious mind is doing. So when you see an image in your head, or you have a thought of someone, or you have like an impulse, the conscious mind wants to go to the straight, like, oh, that means I should talk to that person. Or, you think of an ex and you're like, that means I should call my ex and I'm not over it. No, the subconscious mind's speaking in metaphor, right? So we've got to go A to B to C. Like, then what's next? What's the feeling that you have when you think about that image that comes up? What's it remind you of? When else have you felt it? What could it lead you to? What's like a word association? We play with things like that because, again, the subconscious mind is speaking in metaphor. And sometimes the images that come to mind are not exact either. They're metaphors. So we might see a tree in a meditation and we think, oh, that means I need to be out in nature or deeply rooted or sending, branches up to the sky and growing or something like that. And all of that could be exactly what's trying to be communicated. Or it could also be something like being strong in the wind. It could be something like feeling like you're in your own place, So we really have to do a little bit of exploring when it comes to the subconscious mind. And when it comes to following your intuition and your purpose. But the key is, and the key that I really want to share here is that it's not direct. It's not direct as in, go here, do this. Sometimes if you're really in tune, you hear that. You hear, go to the store right now. And you go to the store right now and something amazing happens. You see the exact person you need to see, right? But more often than that, it's these subtle hints that come wrapped in packaging that looks like something else. And so we stay open. This is why so many people, especially in the woo-woo world, talk about being open. Like, stay open to signs, stay open to signs. They're not meaning like, look around because it's only by looking around. What am I trying to say? They're not trying to be like woo-woo in the sense of like, oh my gosh, everything's a sign, look around. What they're saying is that things aren't always exactly what they seem on face level. Because again, we're talking about things that are non-verbal. Your soul speaks in non-verbal ways. It speaks in feelings. It speaks in images. And so when I talk to people about their soul's visions, and they all say, some people say, it's colorful. Some people say it feels really light. Some people say, people are smiling, or I see people laughing on a beach, and they're like, does that mean that in my soul's world, everybody just sits on a beach and smiles? And it's like, no, that's not what it means. It's just that image is trying to communicate to you the way that people feel, the way they interact, the way they feel about themselves. And so we associate things with the beach. We associate freedom. We associate rhythms. We associate harmony with life. We associate being like that noise that comes in, so you're not necessarily hearing everything, but you're just sort of absorbed in that sense of sound. So you want to dig a little bit deeper. And the other cool thing about this, the subconscious mind and about the intuition, is that it keeps bubbling up. if you've ever had like a rubber ducky, you know, those bath toys, like the rubber ducky, and you try to submerge it in water, it keeps popping up, right? It just keeps popping up. It keeps popping up. It keeps popping up. And that's the exact same thing your purpose is doing. It's the exact same thing your intuition is doing. You can't drown it out per se. You can't push it so far away that it's never going to speak to you again. It's always talking to you because it just can't be drowned. Particularly, I love this phrase drowned out because that's the metaphor we're working on, right? Like it can't be submerged and so deep that you can never hear it. It's always going to come up. And for you, it may come up with, oh, when I close my eyes, I see a certain color. Great. What does that color represent? You know, go and Google it. Or, well, I keep having these flashes that I should talk to so-and-so. Okay, well, what does that person represent? When were they in your life? That doesn't mean you have to call them, particularly if it's not a good relationship for you to open up. But maybe it's an opportunity for you to metaphorically call them in your heart, like call that time to mind. What still needs to be healed from that time? And you can't stop all of this from happening. You know, so many of us feel like, oh, I don't know what my intuition is saying. I don't have an intuition. I don't hear my intuition strongly enough. I really, at this point, believe that that's just not true. I believe that all of us are hearing it all the time. We just don't necessarily know what we're looking at. And so the thought that like you're doing it wrong, we're not doing it wrong. It's happening all the time. We just are going A to B, right? Going back to that improv example, we think, leaf, you immediately think tree, but actually we want to think like the new Nissan car. Like we want to take it one step further. And so when your subconscious is speaking, you're just stopping at the first thought. And we want to dig a little bit deeper because again, we're in the realm of metaphor. The subconscious mind is in the realm of metaphor and imagery. And the metaphor of imagery, right? So think about like the word motif is coming to mind, like things that are consistently showing up in your life, like patterns. Motifs are a great example, actually, like patterns that come up in your life, images that you see, types of shapes that you see, perhaps colors or the types of people that you interact with. You know, you may hit the same personality over and over again. That's usually what we tie to like a lesson that we haven't learned, right? But we look deeper on those things and say, well, what really is going on here? Not necessarily, what am I not getting or what is life trying to tell me, but what would this be representing? Like if this was a sign, if this was a symbol of my subconscious mind, what would it be representing for me? So, and then from there, we can look at other questions like, well, when else have these things come up in my life? What feelings do they bring up for me? If there was a message in this, what would the message be? And just by asking the question, we leave ourselves open to hearing the answer. And most of us are, maybe a little bit afraid to hear the answers because they tend to be quite quick and obvious. And then we go, oh shoot, if that happened that fast and easily, does that mean I'm psychic? Or we have all these other fears around it. So, but like, or we think that we have to hear the answer and then immediately act on it. And again, because the mind is speaking in metaphor, it doesn't mean we have to take action. So sometimes we have this feeling of, well, I'm really attracted to scenes of mountains. And we say, well, what does that represent? And we think, well, it represents freedom. Well, where do I need more freedom? Oh my gosh, I need it in my relationship. That means I have to leave my partner. Again, we're talking about metaphor. We're not talking about exact. So we get really tripped up when we immediately attach tactical level action to these big meta level feelings or big meta level images and subconscious messages that come up. And so I want you to really take a bit more time with it and not go straight to like the most obvious answer that you're thinking of, because it's usually not, there's more nuance to it than that, right? It's not like there are very few signs in the world that are pointing to a specific action, because that would take out free will. And like we're human, we have free will. But the subconscious mind is guiding us in directions that are openings for exploration and understanding, not to fate per se. Right? So that's a really subtle difference. Like fate implies no free will. We have free will, which means all the signs that we're getting are invitations and these chances to look and think deeper and to connect dots, not necessarily to take very specific action because you're fated into it. So if you have this fear of, and I get this all the time with people with purpose, particularly men who are like, I don't want to do purpose work because to do purpose work, that means I'm going to have a midlife crisis and I'm going to have to leave my wife, and I'm going to have to leave my family and my job and, give away everything I've ever had. And I go, what conversation are you having right now? Because it's not the one that we're having, right? Because in my mind, living your purpose is something that's always going on, and we can do it more deliberately and consciously, and we can do it in ways that feel a lot better. It's not something to be afraid of. But we assume that as soon as we hear our soul's deeper message, particularly if you've been in pain, wondering what is it I'm supposed to do, what is wrong, like I can feel this desire to do something bigger, but I can't access it, then we have this feeling like, oh, well, as soon as I understand what that is, it's gonna radically change my life. And so we kind of put blinders on, like we don't want to see it, like, what's that calling over there? I don't really want to know. But even if you end up making radical change, it's not because that's what the message is, right? The message is always, here's how you could be happier. Here's where you might want to look next. It's like playing that game of hotter or colder. Are you getting warmer or are you getting colder? I don't know if you've ever played that game. Like somebody stands and hides somewhere, or you close your eyes and you look for them and they say warmer, warmer, colder, colder. I'm not describing it well. But, it's kind of like that. And so we don't... If you're someone who's been scared of your intuitive messages, they're not direct and they're not directives. We'll put it that way. So a couple things coming out of this. One, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Don't worry if you have been really nervous about what your intuition is saying, because your intuition isn't going to slam you into doing something totally different. That's just not how it works. Number two, when you start to think, oh, if you're somebody who thinks, well, I don't have any access to my intuition, I have absolutely no idea, I challenge you to ask a different question, which is, if you did get images and messages from your intuition, what would they be? And look around then, because they're happening all the time. It's happening all the time. It's the patterns that we see, the same images, the same colors, the words that we notice. Even in... trying to think of a good example, like we even do this in our daily lives. Like most of us, I believe, self-soothe on a deep subconscious level with certain colors and things in our lives. So we balance out. We're always coming into harmony by bringing into our lives things that balance out where we might be a little bit off. So you can even look at some of the things in your life, things like books, like music, like the colors that you like the patterns that you've brought in, whether they're flowers or something else, and look to see, where have you self-soothed? Where have you brought things in because they felt really good for you? And look around and see, oh my gosh, if all of these things were telling a story, what's the story they're telling? Or if all of these things were pointing in a certain direction, what direction are they pointing in? What message is here for me? And ask those like much more general questions and be open to some general answers. And to give one more to like tie up one more conversation that we had here is the one about when people come to mind. Because so many of us, when we're driving along, like we have somebody come to mind and it pulls on our heartstrings. And listening to the radio in the car is a prime way that this happens, because I heard this phrase back in Ohio like 20 years ago, that most love songs are emotional masturbation, right? They're just like trying to pull on your emotions. And so we hear this song and we think of a person and we're like, oh my God, that means I should call this person. No, it means there's an unresolved emotion that song just pulled on, or we tried to go back there or something like that. So when you have intuitive hits, and by intuitive hits, I mean somebody's always bumping to mind, or you have this thought, oh, I should really call so-and-so. If that's not a healthy relationship, maybe we don't go there. But we can ask the next question, this improv A to B, but let's go A to C instead of A to B, if that message wasn't about them directly. Because if the subconscious mind is speaking in metaphor, then they don't mean that person. They mean what that person represents, right? So we can think about, oh, well, what is this person capturing for me right now? Maybe it's a sense of loss. Maybe it's a sense of growth. Maybe it's a sense of, wow, my life has changed. Have I really firmly embraced that change? Am I ready to cut ties with all the things that are in the past? That doesn't mean specific people per se, but perhaps who we used to be, or ways that we used to show up, or ways that we used to be in the world. So we can use these people to our advantage but just not by assuming it's them that the subconscious mind is talking about. So I hope that was helpful, but to remember the subconscious mind is pre-verbal, it's nonverbal, so it's using images, colors, metaphors, all of that, but not direct words. So we're not in the realm of having to be scared about directives, right? It's not fate, it's suggestion. And then those are suggestions that we can explore because imagery and metaphor involve meaning, and that meaning is subjective. It's what we bring to it, and that's the free will part, right? It's the way that we see, the lens that we put on it, that we see what these things represent for us. So I hope that is helpful. I would love to hear from you about something that's been coming up where all of a sudden now you're like, oh, I get it. That was actually my subconscious talking to me. That's actually my intuition. That's actually my purpose continually reflecting this message for me. I would love to hear that. Feel free to pop it in the comments, or you can private message me if it's something that you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to share that. I would love to hear that from you. And now I'm going off to dinner with my aunt and uncle and my lovely man. So I will talk to you soon, and let me know how this goes. Mwah.